Book 2 of the Iliad highlights some of the same essential problems going on at the core of the conflict that Book 1 does. It develops them a little bit more, makes them a little more deep. You get a greater sense of the flaws in the characters on the Greek side. That leads to some of this conflict, what is driving some of these issues, both on the literal issue of the war that is being fought, but also the metaphoric issue of the battle for finding a way to knit together all of these disparate units of individuals into a coherent society as a functioning civilization. That essential conflict drives everything throughout the poem, and this becomes more explicit in Book 2. Book 2 begins with Zeus coming up with an idea that he is going to make some trouble for the Greeks, make some trouble. He has been appealed to try and make it seem like Achilles is vital and that the Greeks really need him. He has been appealed to by Achilles' mom, and so he is figuring out a way to do this, and he strikes on the idea, okay, I'm gonna go, I will send a dream to Agamemnon of some really historically bad advice, and he will go with that because he's kind of a dope. Zeus plays to Agamemnon's ego, his sense of his own inviolability, and essentially his gullibleness, his lack of critical thinking. And so he goes and he sends the character of the dream to go and implant this little idea that they should go on the attack, that they should just forget about Achilles, just get together and go on the attack. And of course, Agamemnon wakes up from this and says, yeah, because he's a dope, he's a moron, and he has no critical thinking whatsoever. Agamemnon wakes up with this enthusiasm. He woke from sleep and the divine voice flowed around him. He sat upright and donned his soft tunic, fresh and fine, and cast his great cloak round him, and beneath his smooth feet he bound his splendid sandals, and then he cast about his shoulders his silver-studded sword, and took the scepter of his fathers, imperishable, eternal, and with this set out along the ships of the bronze-clad Achaeans. There you can see a couple of things going on. For one thing, you can see that he is very wealthy. He is very luxurious. He has soft clothes, fresh and fine. He has soft sandals for his delicate feet. This is a sense of the Greeks are perhaps a little given over to luxury. This theme will come up again and again. The idea that you've gone soft, not like the heroes of old. You are now all a little spoiled, and Agamemnon is among the worst of them. So you've got that, but also this sense of the grandeur and the greatness. He has been swelled up in this image. Of course he's going to get brought down humiliatingly. So the text is sort of playing with this and sort of goading him into it. But at the same time, Agamemnon, being an idiot, makes things worse. He takes that dream, he just says, yeah, I'm gonna do that, but first, let's see if I can do something even dumber. And so he goes and he announces that, you know what, everybody, all you Greeks, 9 and change years, that's enough. Let's just pack it in and go home. And everybody goes nuts. Why? What are you kidding? This is, why? He is expecting a lot of pushback, and he is expecting that everybody will rally to it and say, no, let's go. But in fact, the vast majority of the soldiers go for it, and they say, yeah, let's get the hell out of here. This war is old. This war is tiring. We're not getting anywhere. It's a stalemate for a decade now. Let's pack it in, cut our losses, and go home. And so they're all basically heading for the exits, and Agamemnon's like, wait, huh? And some of the attendants come in. Some of his junior officers, so to speak, have to come in. You know, this is crazy. Odysseus, you have to step in. Odysseus, go talk some sense into the Greeks. Stop this rout. Stop the exodus. These people can't be trusted. Notice the anti-populism at play here. Athena, the goddess of reason specifically, is coming down and speaking to Odysseus, another reasonable figure. People who are extraordinary thinkers, who are not the common lot. And so they are going to point out to the common horde what they should do, because relying on populist sentiment is what Agamemnon did, and it led to a disaster, essentially, in the making. Odysseus and Athena get together as the elites and say, okay, we need to put a stop to this. So it's an interesting little note that they are interjecting here. And then you get basically a large council of the Greeks come together to discuss this. You know, do we really want to cut and run, so to speak? And you get a succession of speakers, some of them quite interesting. You get one character who's very curious in the Homeric canon, named Thersites. He stands up and he is a cripple. He is ugly. He has some sort of a speech problem. It's a little unclear what, maybe some sort of a speech impediment, maybe just coarse language. It's a little uncertain. But he stands up and he is known for being a critic of the elites. People like Achilles, people like Agamemnon, people like Odysseus, and the elites all hate him. But for some reason, he is allowed to get up and speak, which gives you a little sense of the not democratic, but the open forum that the Greek culture allows here, where there is a place for. And Thersites gets up there and just lambasts Agamemnon for this decision. Now, a couple of things. His ugliness is dwelt upon. And this is significant, I would say, because it sort of discredits him in a way. You can read this as, well, he's ugly on the outside. That reflects an inner corruption of some sort. He must be ugly on the inside. And so we should discount a lot of what he's saying. So what he's saying is attacking the elites. But, okay, he's ugly, so we shouldn't take that seriously. But at the same time, he is attacking the elites, and we can't help but read that speech and say, well, yeah, he's kind of got a point. The criticism is sort of defended against by making him ugly. And this is just another figure, I would say, of a truth teller who is very concerned with his own vulnerability. Remember again in the beginning, the seer who wants protection from Achilles before he reads about to go through with this war. And it suggests also the characters of the bard Demodocus who comes up in the Odyssey and stuff like that, somebody who is good with words. There is a consciousness of a poetic position, I would say, within the narrative, and there's a certain privileging of it, but at the same time a defense against accusations or attacks on those grounds. Robert Graves, one scholar, sort of hints at that too. He wrote a book about Achilles. You can see how it is kind of at the same time a criticism of the social structure, where he is able to sit there and say, you know, you elites, you screw everything up because you're morons. But at the same time, it's a defense against it, because it's suggesting plausibly that criticism is invalid because Thersites is ugly or a cripple or something like that. It's plausible deniability, I would argue. There's a certain complication there that the text is nestling into, but at the same time, it has to be argued, it is raising this perspective. Even if to shoot it down nominally, it is raising that perspective, and you as a reader or a listener in the original can sit there and take it in however you want and dispel it if you like, but not necessarily if you like. So there's that question. Another speaker is Nestor. Nestor is the old man of the group who's always telling them, well, back in my day, this is how we did it. He's a counselor, he's a consigliere, if you will. The role he plays is often as kind of a scold to you soft people today. He's very long-winded. He is often rather silly, and he's always defending the honor of the past ways. And he makes this argument. He makes he scolds all of the people who are looking to run off. Says in the Lattimore translation, "You are all like children when you hold assembly, infant children to whom the works of war mean nothing. Where shall our covenants go and the oaths we have taken?" You are all talking rather than doing. Your job is to go fight, not to talk. Now, the Greek assembly is kind of a mainstay of that society. So in a way, he's hearkening back to a kind of authoritarian rule at the expense of that, saying, well, okay, the council is just people yabbering, and it kind of is in this. But you can see how he is being cast or positioned in this little moment as kind of a scold, and not necessarily somebody who is a man of the future, but rather a little old-fashioned and perhaps outdated. He very noticeably says, "Well, what about the oaths? What about our the oaths we have taken, our covenants, all of the dignity that we have invested in the past? What about the rule of our society, the institutions of our society?" But at the same time, he also, at just a couple of lines later, says that all of the soldiers out there, you shouldn't go home until you have bedded a Trojan wife, the wife of a Trojan man, meaning you should all be here because there's going to be a lot of raping going on, and you want to be part of that. It's a troubling little line to be coming from, well, for one thing, a very old man, but also just this is part of the rallying cry. He is, in a sense, investing in his own little populism here, I would argue, calling up the most common animalistic qualities of the crowd he's addressing and trying to spur them through that. He is, in essence, an archaic figure. He argues very explicitly at one point, again in the Lattimore translation, talking to Agamemnon, set your men in order by tribes, by clans, Agamemnon, and let clan go in support of clan, let tribe support tribe. Not identifying them all as, can't we all just come together as Greeks, but rather let's just recognize that we're all just tribes out there and we should all just identify as that. And if we can work together, fantastic. But we are indissolubly individuals within this broader concept that isn't really a thing of society. It's an interesting political position. It's an interesting argument. It's an interesting point of rhetoric that he's trying to offer here to try and get people to do things, which is his whole role in the Iliad. But pretty soon, through the arguing that goes on, particularly the words of Odysseus steps up and makes a very strong case, the Greeks are swayed. Another sense that, well, okay, they were so committed to abandoning the field, and now they're so committed to coming back to it and fighting for the original bad idea that Agamemnon went with, that they are kind of sheep-like, that they can't really be relied upon. This is an anti-populist suggestion here, that they are just easily swayed by words. So maybe the council criticism that Nestor has is a little accurate. Like, well, democracy is not a strong thing. It's a point to be considered. So they all take the field. They all become real, just raring at the bit, and they all come in together. And what we get then, the poet steps back and says, well, let me just introduce all of these people. And then you get this long catalog, as it's called, a long list of the individual people and groups making up the Greek forces. And this goes on for many, many lines, a couple of hundred lines, where we're told about this figure, and he's from this city, and he comes from this heritage, and brings with him this group of people, and what kind of people they like, or what kind of people they are, and where they're from, and what they do. Are they great horsemen? Are they great pliers of the sea? All of this stuff, all of these individual characteristics, and the name after the name after the name, they're just going by. Now, this does a couple of things. For one thing, it has been noted, this is a little shout out to everybody around the poet who is saying all this, and like, hey, I just heard my hometown mentioned. And it gathers them all together and helps them get a little invested, who doesn't want to feel a part of something. It makes them feel recognized and legitimated. It also, in the totality of all of these names, sense of the irreducible individuality within the broader group. This is a loose collection of tribes, of clans. Nestor is not wrong in that. They are all individuals or individual groups coming together. But there is that inherent conflict between the individuality of the small clan and the broader mission as Greeks. Greece didn't really exist. So there is that dynamic going on. But they all take to the field. And you can see the Trojans coming out as well. Book 2 ends with the Trojans taking the field, and you get a short catalog going on there too, giving just a hint that, well, okay, they have individual clans too. They have people too. They are not that different than the Greeks. It is all kind of the same. So that broad concept of just Greekdom can be expanded to a broad concept of soldiery, or dare I say it, humanity writ large. We are all individuals or individual groups within broader context. There are individuals within small groups, there are individuals within large groups, there are individual small groups within much larger groups, and this goes on and on and on like Russian nesting dolls. There's always a new context to be thought of, and this book in particular, within the poem, is pushing that notion, the idea that we need to see and be aware of all of these common bonds that we might have, all of these concentric circles of identity that define us and either limit us or unite us. And where do you really want to fall along that line? What voice do you want to be offering in that discussion, in that broader council, in that debate? Do you want to be a voice of the past, like Nestor, saying, got to go back to these small units, respect your tribal elders, and we're all basically barbarians at heart? Or do we want to look to a future where we recognize a common humanity? And maybe that comes at the expense of our ability to fight a war. But maybe this war is kind of stupid. Maybe this war is being led by idiots like Agamemnon. Maybe the war itself is self-destructive. All of this is percolating in Book 2, and all of this invests us more in the story as it goes forward.